Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Erin Urban. We'll be talking about how to increase your impact with virtual interviews and make sure that you make the best impression even if you are not meeting these people one-on-one. Even before the pandemic, virtual interviews were definitely on the rise, and now it's become the new normal. Most companies, if they're hiring, they are conducting virtual interviews, panel interviews, one-on-one interviews. And what we've done is we've taken an already stressful situation and then put it online. So that's even more stressful. For most people, virtual interviews are not comfortable. In fact, a lot of people report that they feel nervous, they forget what they're going to say, they're not sure how to present themselves when you're confronted with a camera. So even though you can see the people on the other end, hopefully, how do you promote your brand, articulate yourself, and be your authentic self in the interview without suffering from quote unquote camera fright? I'm excited to share with you today some key tips. Number one, why you feel disconnected when it comes to virtual interviews in the first place, and how you can avoid some common virtual interview mistakes, as well as how to easily increase your impact and your influence even online. So let's make sure that we're connected, and we can do a quick tech check here to make sure I am indeed online. And I'm super excited to talk to you today. So I want to make sure that what we do today is have an interactive session. So it's important to me that I answer your questions. Because virtual interviews are super uncomfortable, please, when you hop on, say hi, say where you're from, say your name if you're joining us from either LinkedIn or Facebook, particularly Facebook. I can't see your name, so please do say who you are and where you're from. And don't hesitate to ask questions, because there's a lot of things that many different people have experienced when it comes to virtual interviews. I want to make sure that I answer your questions. Let's see here. Looks like I am indeed live. Let's make sure I'm actually streaming. And looks like I am. Hi, Cornetia. Glad to have you on this morning. I'm glad you could join us. So I'm super excited to be here to talk about, again, how to interview with impact virtually. So if you've never seen me before, my name is Erin Urban, or Coachy Urban. You can find out more about me at coachyurban.com. What I do is I help driven, experienced professionals remove career roadblocks to increase their impact, influence, and income, and unlock their potential. And today we'd like to unlock your virtual interview potential. So I hope you're with me, and I hope you're armed with questions, because this is going to be a very interactive session. And I'm super looking forward to sharing with you some key tips. Number one, how to understand why virtual interviews feel so darn disconnecting in the first place. And then number two, what some common mistakes are so you can avoid those when it comes to virtual interviews. And number three, and most importantly, how to easily elevate your impact in the virtual environment. So let's see, we have a couple of people joining us here. Hey, Julie Mae, glad to see you this morning. Somebody else here hopping on. Kim, good to see you. Mohammed, great to see you. Glad you could join us. So again, don't hesitate to add your questions in the comment area during this entire presentation or this entire event, because I want to make sure that I answer your questions. Everybody's experience is unique, and everybody's challenges that they need to overcome when it comes to being on camera is different. So let's dive in. First of all, what are the reasons why we might feel disconnected when it comes to the virtual interview? Well, first of all, the biggest reason boils down to neuroscience and our brain. When you are confronted with a camera and you are not one-on-one with someone, you are connecting with this individual virtually, whether it's in a meeting or whether it's for an interview, you are missing a lot of nonverbal cues that come when we are one-on-one with somebody. So when you're one-on-one with someone, you have that 360-degree perspective and experience that you just don't have when you're in a box or looking at a screen. What happens is your brain is constantly searching for nonverbal cues that just aren't there. They just aren't. And I'm sure most of you are joining and are listening to the replay. And if you are listening to the replay, make sure you say hashtag replay and post your questions and comments. I will get back to you. But most of us have experienced the Zoom zombie phase. You know what I'm talking about. When you get on an online meeting and you've got this. And people are probably perfectly fine, and nothing's actually wrong with them, but they look miserable. And I call these people Zoom zombies because they're just sitting there, no expression. That's really hard to interact with because you're not getting any cues at all of what they're thinking or what kind of mood they're in or how they're taking what you're saying. And it's super stressful. So when you're in an interview situation, not everybody is savvy on how to communicate their feelings, thoughts, and emotions in a box. So with that being said, how can you make sure you are a Zoom zombie and you can show up? So that's the number one reason why we feel so disconnected when we are communicating with someone via virtual or video platform, whether it be for interviews or virtual online meetings. It's because our brain is constantly searching for nonverbal cues that just aren't there. So we're missing a lot of data that we use to define whether or not we're actually connecting with this person. Make sense? So let's see what questions we have so far. And Jerry, please say more about emoting on camera. Oh, you got it, Jerry. I will be talking about that for sure. In our final section, I'll be talking about how to elevate your impact and what emoting is, and why you have to emote, and what is that, and why should you do it. So number two, the other reason we feel disconnected when we're having a virtual interview or a virtual meeting is because the magic is missing. So what do I mean by that? Well, in person, when we meet with somebody one-on-one and we're collaborating or communicating with this person, our brain releases certain chemicals. And those chemicals just simply aren't released when you're talking to a camera. One of those chemicals is called oxytocin. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel connected. That's not happening. You're talking to a camera, and your brain knows that. So it's not giving you that feel good, connected, warm and fuzzy. It's just not. So that's a problem. So here you are, you're probably looking at Zoom zombies and you're feeling disconnected. That's very, very stressful. So you have a stressful situation, which is the interview, and then you add more challenges. Yay, fun. So what's the other challenge that we have? Well, elevated stress levels, obviously, because we're missing nonverbal cues. We can't, we're not getting that feel-good chemical. We're not getting that warm, fuzzy feeling. And you're in an interview situation, your cortisol or your stress response chemical is way high. Your stress level is probably through the roof. Well, the problem with that is it doesn't help you articulate very well. So when your stress is super high, you need to be able to lower that, and I'll be talking about that in a minute. But what happens is your body sometimes goes into what we call fight or flight. So if you're going into an interview situation and you find that you're feeling a little panicky, or that little panic feeling is your number one cue that you might be in a fight or flight situation. And what happens is your body drives all the energy into physical response, which is great if you're fighting off lions and tigers and bears, but not so useful in the interview. So what happens is you don't articulate well. And inevitably after the interview, you have the forehead slap moment and you think, oh, I should have said this or that. Why didn't I think of it? It should have been right on the tip of my tongue. Or if they ask you a question, you struggle to remember what you were going to say, or you have difficulty articulating it. That's why your brain is redirecting energy to physical responses and reactions and not to cognitive function. So all of this kind of stinks, and we need to know how to overcome it. So we have a couple of questions. Jerry says, again, talk about more emoting. Holly, great to see you. Nice to have you online. So let's talk about how to avoid some major mistakes, because there's a lot of mistakes that can be easily avoided when it comes to setting yourself up for success for the virtual interview or for any online meeting, to be honest. So all these tips I'm sharing with you can be leveraged for virtual meetings of any type, but particularly important for the interview. So number one, bad camera angles. You've seen them. And it's very common because most of us have our cameras on our laptops. Not all of us have the luxury of having an external camera. Well, what you can do is elevate your camera on your laptop up with a few books or something similar. What you want is to have that camera level with your face. So just imagine if you're like looking up my nose the whole time or at the top of my head, that would not make a great impression. So you want to have the camera level with your face. And there's a couple good neurological reasons why you want to have that camera level with your face as well. One of those reasons is because if you are looking down on somebody, they feel unconsciously, this is not something you probably articulate, but unconsciously they feel like you're looking down on them. Don't want that. Or if you're looking up at them and they're looking down on you, then they feel superior than you. We don't want that either, particularly in an interview. We want to make sure we're on a level playing field and that we see, quote unquote, eye to eye, literally. So you want that camera level with your face. That's top tip number one. Now, tip number two is busy backgrounds, having a lot of things going on in the background. Because we're not one-on-one, we don't have all these other nonverbal cues going on, we're very visual. So we will be busy analyzing everything in the square. And you're doing it right now. Just think about it. How many things do you see in my background and what's your impression of them? So quickly type in the comments, what do you see in my background and what's your impression of those things? Because everything in the background matters. Like even the door back here, this is an old house from like 1875. So this door goes nowhere. But I don't want to take it out because it's the original door, But you might be thinking something about that door. Or what about this picture back here, right? So there are things going on in your mind, but just imagine for a moment if there was like a lot of stuff in the background, or maybe a wall of shot glasses. Woo, here's a party animal. No. So just consider it. Everything in the square is your brand. Make sense? What you're wearing, what you look like matters, as well as everything behind you. You don't know how many people I have seen on a Zoom meeting and a fan is literally rotating on their head. Literally, it's what it looks like from my angle. And it's just like, freaks me out. You can't look away. And you find it hard and difficult to focus on what they're actually saying because they got this thing going on. Or like this one young lady I was on a Zoom call with, and I know, I get it. We don't always have an office. It's not easy to, make sure we have an uncluttered space behind us. Some of us have kids at home. I mean, it's a zoo right now, people, and we get it. And people are a lot more forgiving than normal. But there's an easy way you can fix it. So you see this screen over here. So this screen over here, buy one of those. Put it behind you. They're pretty cheap, pretty easy to do. Just put it behind you. You've got a mess going on. You're working out of the storage room or the second bedroom or the dining room table or whatever. Just put that behind you and nobody can see anything. So let's see what we have here. I see some pretty neutral and things from nature. Yes, that's right. That's what I'm going for here is growth. I love growth and I love nature. I'm an outdoors nut. So that you kind of tell. So let's see, Jesse, home rather than work environments could be perception. Right. So, well, right now, none of us are quote unquote in the office. So don't expect your interviewers to be super picky about whether or not you're showing up from an office or not. Let's see, Caitlin says, I did notice almost right away that today you're turned more and we can see that picture. Yeah. So that's right. Here's my picture right here. I painted that, by the way. Not great, but I did it. You have a butterfly trying to get in your ear. That's so funny. You're absolutely right. So see what our brains are doing? This is hysterical. The butterfly, it says someone from Facebook, I keep seeing it in line with your eyes. Not sure if it's deliberate, but my peripheral vision keeps seeing it. I end up focusing on it more than your eyes. Maybe I need to move the butterfly. Let's see. Here we go. You can't see it. So that's good. That's good. These are all great. I see many leaves. Yeah, exactly. So you're looking. We're very visual, so we can see what's going on behind this, and it makes an impression. I mean, it's obvious that I'm live from my home, and this is my home office space right now. This is what I have. So, and a lot of us are like that. don't get too caught up in whether or not you feel like you're sending the I'm at home signal, because right now, that's most of us. And interviewers figure that you probably are at home. If you are doing an interview from an office space, great. And on Zoom, you can choose your virtual background. Just keep in mind that when you choose a virtual background on Zoom, particularly if you are a lady with curly hair or have something going on with your hair, Zoom does weird things with your head. And it can be very distracting. So if you do pick a Zoom background, a virtual background, please make sure that it's not busy and it's not distracting and it's not weird, like it's not an outer space photo or something like that. Please keep it neutral. If you want to have like a conference room behind you, I've seen people do that. That's very nice. But just know that if you've got hair like I do, Zoom cuts your head off. That's the problem. So that's one reason why you don't see a virtual background. So let's see. Yeah, me moving over is better. Let's see. Yeah, and now the leaves frame my head, see. Douglas says, great view in the picture frame you and hides the butterfly. I'll have to keep that in mind. So I won't rearrange everything right now, but you get the point, right? So if I was over here, then I'm in the picture versus the butterfly trying to get into to my ear. Oh, thank you, Caitlin. She says, wow, that's amazing that I painted it. Yes, I did paint that. That's what I do in my non-existent free time. So someone asked from Facebook, by the way, the tips from the focus resume in the last session worked, even though it's lots of work. Actually have an interview Thursday. Woohoo! So can we give a round of applause right now for someone who says they applied the tips from the last session and they have an interview on Thursday? That's awesome! Oh my gosh, that made my day. Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm kind of derailed because that's so amazing. I'm so happy for you. Yay! But yeah, so I'm really glad you can apply some of these tips and have them work for you. That means the world to me, and I'm super excited. So let us know how the interview turns out. Please let me know. But yeah, busy backgrounds or even backgrounds like this, which are, not a lot going on, but it does have visual inputs. So you have to be careful. What do those visual inputs mean to the people who are looking at it? Because all they have is a square, and the square is your brand. Make sense? So bad lighting, that happens a lot, and it's tough. I get it. You're probably, talking online, indoors. You don't necessarily have studio lighting. And guess what? Neither do I. I have Mother Nature. In front of me, I have 3 windows with shears, and that provides the light for these live sessions. That's all I use. You can do the same thing. Just make sure it's not blinding you, then you still see who you're talking to. So you can do that, or you can buy one of those lights. Cheap and cheerful, put a white tablecloth on your desk and shine a light down on the tablecloth, and it will uplight your face. So we need to be cognizant of the light. We don't want to be totally in the dark. We don't want to also then have the light behind us, because then nobody can see your face. And that makes you look very mysterious, but not super useful in an interview situation. So, poor vocal quality. Now, I don't use headphones because I've noticed that headphones tend to go out in the middle of a live session, and you never know that until later. Or somebody's, frantically typing, we can't hear you, we can't hear you. So I don't use one, and it might be a little echoey, but it's, again, not the end of the world. However, I have a train in this town. And occasionally a few of you have experienced when we've been on live sessions and a train has gone through. Woo-hoo, whoop, whoop. That's right. Train, here we go. I take it in stride because it's live. Your interviewers may or may not, but keep in mind, focus on what you can control and don't obsess on what you can't. If the lawnmower guy shows up next door while you're in the middle of an interview, don't freak out. Just let your interviewers know, the lawn person has showed up next door and you might hear some noise. Just inform them of what's going on so they don't make some impressions or think something weird is happening, because the vocal or what comes through on the speakers on the other end may not sound like a lawnmower. It may sound like something totally different. You never know. So we just want to inform them and let them know, give them a heads up. However, if you do have kids and pets with spouses, let them know you're on an interview and Hopefully, fingers crossed, everything will be peaceful. But we can't control the dog barking, right? And look for these as opportunities to make a connection with your interviewers. If your dog barks in the middle of an interview, because most of us are working remotely from home still, even though some of us are transitioning back into the office, that may or may not last, we'll see. But if your dog barks in the middle of an interview, just say, oh, that's my golden retriever, that's my lab, that's my Yorkie poo, whatever, right? And somebody may, we'll hope and pray, say, oh, I have a dog too, blah, blah. Point of connection. If you can make a connection with your interviewers, that's huge. So leverage these sometimes distractions, is what we consider them distractions, as a point of connection. Like during one live event on a Career Coffee Chat Live before, I've had a train go through. Somebody said, oh, we had a train go through our small town when I was a boy growing up, right? That's a connection. They can relate. This is very important, people. When people can relate to you, it is huge. So be able to be agile and turn those distractions into a potential point of connection and build a rapport with the people you're interviewing with. That's a big deal. Let's see, what else do we have here? Christine says, my problem is all my nervous energy is directed to one leg and I have terrible aches and cramps after it. Oh, I'm really sorry. If that's your only problem, then you're probably okay. I've seen worse, like nervous tics. I talk with my hands, but I always talk with my hands. That's just me. I always do that. I don't have to be nervous to do it. But yeah, if that's all that's going on, you're good, because there are a lot of people who have a lot worse. They clam up, they can't articulate, or their palms sweat tremendously, or their underarms sweat. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are an underarm sweater, and that does happen, even with professional speakers, it happens. We know to either wear very light colored, so it doesn't show, a jacket, a pullover, or some sort of shawl, camisole, what have you, or dark colored shirts. Top tips there. Because just in case, you never know, you might have to lift your arms, and nobody wants to see that. Let's see what else we have here. All right. So what else? Zombie face. So the last and final tip I have for you to avoid Zoom mistakes is, or any sort of video interview mistakes, is the zombie face. So I call the Zoom zombie face because Zoom is becoming an adjective, a noun, and an action term. But the Zoom zombie face is, and you all know what it is. You've seen it. This is what you get. This is it. This is just this. Just imagine if I did this entire live show with a Zoom zombie face. No one would be watching right now, I can tell you that. And there's a good reason why. Now, these people may be perfectly fine. There probably is nothing wrong with them, and they're having a great day. But who's the wiser? Who would know? Which gives me a great segue into emoting. So let's talk about how to easily elevate your impact in the virtual space, particularly for interviews. And let's talk about emoting. So when you are emoting, that means you are presenting your facial expressions, your vocal voice, your vocal variety 30% more than you would normally. And this is important because if you don't emote, you might be a Zoom zombie. And we don't want that at all, ever. And it's tough. It's actually really challenging to remember to smile. So number one tip I have for you is practice smiling. Practice what I call the neutrally pleasant expression. And that's a little smile on your face, very much like this one. You can see here my little sort of dimples are showing. And just practice this. Practice it if you aren't on online meetings very often, then just practice it by yourself. Practice it with your spouse. Practice with your kids. Have a contest. I don't know. Think of something fun. Because it takes practice to keep doing it. And you'll notice that if you have this neutrally pleasant expression on your face for an entire video meeting, your face will hurt. So as Christine shared, her leg hurts. Well, guess what? Your face might have a cramp after you've done this for 45 minutes to an hour. So Amin says, if I have books in my background, would this be an issue? I don't think so. I don't feel that books in your background are going to be a problem. What might be a problem is if they're like right here and they're like right on top of you, then people might be trying to read the spines and not paying attention to what you're saying. But if they're back there somewhere, not a big deal. Just keep in mind what types of things are in our background. If it's a wall full of liquor bottles, that might not send the best impression. So, emoting, very, very important. Neutrally pleasant expression, very, very important. Practice this in your spare time. The more practice you have at holding a neutrally pleasant expression, the better chance you have of not becoming a Zoom zombie halfway through the meeting. Oh my gosh, it happens all the time. Trust me. Just start looking for it. Actually, if you do a lot of virtual online meetings, start playing a game. How many Zoom zombies do I see? Or worse yet, this. Of course, you never do that in an interview. I know you wouldn't, but just keep in mind, people aren't aware of what this little box, what that message is sending. So you just have this little square, and this is your brand, and this is all the visual cues people have to determine what mood you are in, what kind of person you are, what you're thinking, what you think of them. Use it wisely. So you have to emote more than you would in person. And the reason is because, as I mentioned earlier, our brains are looking for all these nonverbal cues that just aren't there. So we need to give other people's brains some cues so they will know what type of person you are. Now you'll notice that I vary my vocal tone quite a bit. And there's a good reason for that, and it's to keep people engaged and make sure you don't fall asleep halfway through the live event and be like, oh gosh, yeah, career coffee chat, I need more coffee. We don't want that. So keep that in mind. When you are speaking to people on a video conference situation or video interview, particularly, vary your vocal tone. Do not stay monotone. And for a lot of us, that is very natural. So it'll take practice, but practice it, record yourself. Don't go big right away, because if you go big and way outside of your norm, and then you show up for the first day of work or your first online meeting at work, they won't know who you are. Like, I heard this person and this is who I get. What happened? So don't go crazy with it. But we do need to emote 30% more than we would normally, because there's just so many cues that aren't available in a virtual space. So let's see, we have a couple questions here. Somebody from Facebook says, how about reading from the computer screen? You notice what I'm doing here? Computer screen's over here. Okay, if you want to read from your computer screen, what I recommend is that hopefully you've got a big monitor and you put it right behind your camera. Okay, maybe you have your laptop set up in front, you've got your laptop open, you're using a laptop camera. If you have a larger screen, you certainly can't elevate that, but you want it directly behind the camera. And the reason is because otherwise you're going to be doing this the whole time. Now, I will say this. If you are doing a video interview and you have your cheat notes on your laptop screen, and you can toggle between screens, and you're using the camera on your laptop, no one's probably the wiser, as long as you keep your eyes at the screen most of the time. Now that means you won't be looking directly at the camera, but most people don't. So while it sends a better message if you look directly at the camera, if you look down occasionally at the screen, particularly when people are talking to you, that's perfectly acceptable. In other words, people know and understand. It's become a social norm. It's become the norm in the virtual interview and video environment. I mean, people know that your camera's here and your screen's there. They get that. So if your eyes shift down slightly, not a big deal, right? Now, if you're reading from like verbatim, someone asks you a question, tell me more about, a time when you leveraged XYZ skills in such and such situation, and you are going, great, I have my notes. Well, this one time when I was in band camp, Okay, be careful with that because your eyes travel. You'll notice that on pre-recorded videos, when people are reading scripts, sometimes their eyes will travel. People can see that. So be very, very careful about reading your answers. All right. Now, if you want to know more about how to prepare for an interview, particularly when it comes to articulating your value in an interview, I've got a link in the description of this live event that helps you join my free 10-day career challenge. Well, I'll be talking about exactly how to articulate your value and flesh out your career contribution stories. So when it comes to interviews like this, you're not at a loss for words. All right. And it's at the top of your mind. So other questions we have. Like your cheat notes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So hopefully that answers your question. If you are reading your cheat notes, be careful with that. You might want to practice it with somebody and just say, okay, can you see my eyes traveling? And they can give you some feedback before the interview. So you want to prepare for that interview. So what else do we need to keep in mind? So we talked about emoting 30% more. Managing your stress response is huge. Okay, so we want to make sure that we review how to manage your stress response, because for most of us, being in front of a camera is not fun. It's not natural, it's not fun, and we don't enjoy it. And this interview, oh my God, so super stressful. So how can we release some of that stress, lower our cortisol or our stress response hormone, so we can articulate better and present ourselves better on camera? Number one, you may have heard of Amy Cuddy, Cuddy. Amy Cuddy. You can look her up on TED Talks, and she talks about how our body language shapes who we are. And literally, her premise is your body language, how we position our body, will either elevate our stress response or lower it. And her research has proven that's true. So one of the things you can do is before the interview, ideally about 5 minutes before, practice a power pose, whether it's a superwoman pose with your hands on your hips or your hands up in the air with celebration pose or several other power poses that you can find on her TED Talk at Amy Cuddy, Cuddy, in her TED Talk. You can practice that, hold it for 2 minutes, and it'll actually lower your cortisol level. That's been proven to happen, unless you have some abnormal health challenges, okay? Another thing you can do is deep, slow breathing. We do not want to, like Lamont's class, we're not giving birth, we're just doing an interview, okay? So deep, slow breathing, all right? So, and you can do this during the interview, because the great thing is you're on camera. Chances are they can't tell that you're taking a deep, slow breath a couple times during the interview to slow your heart rate down, lower your stress response, and articulate more clearly. In fact, I use the same method before I get on camera, because right before I get on camera, my body has this weird, oh my gosh, and I'm like, you waited till now to get stressed out? And then I have to chill out and then go back to my normal and being able to present without being stressed. So I do deep belly breathing. So breathing all the way down into your diaphragm and slowly letting that out. So that's very helpful. It signals to our body to just basically chill out. All right. So power down. We're not about to fight lions and tigers and bears. All right. So just power down. Some people find it useful to do exercise before the interview. Now, ideally, you will have exercised and cleaned up before the interview, but it actually is very helpful because it helps the blood flow to the brain, it helps us articulate better, and also gives us a safe outlet for any sort of energy or stress prior to the interview. So those are some top tips for you to lower your stress response. Now, let's see, what other questions do we have here? All right, so we're good to go. Preparing and setting up. I mentioned it before, I touched on it. You want to make sure that you have prepared and set up ahead of time. Know where your camera angle is. Practice, how do I sound? Get online with a friend, your spouse, whatever that looks like for you, someone you can trust to give you honest feedback. If you want to read your notes, make sure you practice that with somebody first to make sure it's not obvious, because we don't want that. Now, from time to time, when I've done a live webinar or virtual event, I've had this big screen behind me, which I don't have today, that has a few notes just to remind myself what I'm talking about, because I want to make sure I'm looking at the camera, not looking away or looking at the slides, right? So I'll have my notes behind me. But I need to make sure that my eyes aren't stuck to that screen very long, because people will notice. And that doesn't send a good message. So just keep that in mind. Practice your setup before the interview. That way, you'll know it works. You'll know whatever you're using for your audio and visual equipment works. Your laptop's in the right position, and you're ready to go. So that's one less thing you have to worry about, right? The other thing you want to keep in mind is managing the facial expressions. Again, practice this. Seriously, you will find after about 30 minutes, your face will start to hurt. It's very, very important. And after a while, you build facial muscles and it doesn't hurt so much. But you need to look happy to be there. That's very important. If you look like this the whole time, people are going to think, well, we don't want to hire that person. They look miserable. So look happy. Be engaging. And also don't sit like a zombie the entire time you're talking, because if you just sat like this and never moved around, people would wonder what's wrong with you. Are they glued to their seat? What's wrong with them? So lean in when you talk. Use your space wisely. You'll notice that news anchors, when they're delivering the news, they move their body around when they talk to emphasize points. And that's on purpose. They're trained to do that. Now, actually, I've never received any training. This is just me. I'm naturally bouncy. So also, when you're in the middle of the interview, practice the pause. Feel free to pause. If someone asks you a question, you need to think about it, go, that's a very interesting question. I'm glad you asked that. That whole amount of time allows your brain to think. So while you're thinking, and saying, that's a very interesting question, I'm glad you asked that, it gives your brain time to pop out the answer. This is very important. Or just pause for about a second or two. That's okay. If you make it too long of a pause, then people will start to wonder what's wrong with that person. Or did her camera freeze? Which happens. You could say, oh, I had an internet problem. Hey, use it. If you really need to think, just stay in place for a second and then go, oh, I had an internet glitch. Is everything okay now? Whatever it takes. But if you truly do experience stage fright and completely dam up, leverage the pause, okay? Practice the pause and practice breathing throughout the interview. Sometimes we forget to breathe, and that certainly elevates your heart rate. And don't be afraid to clarify. Now, this is whether you are in person or whether you are online, it doesn't matter. Don't be afraid to clarify. You're not in an inquisition, okay? You're not being, grilled by the FBI. Clarify the question. If you're not quite sure, or there's more than one way to answer that question, you definitely want to make sure that you are clear on what their expectations are. And number one biggest question people get hung up on is, tell me more about yourself. Well over 90% of professionals will immediately leap into talking about their professional history. That may or may not be what they wanted to hear. You can ask, would you like to know more about my professional history, or would you like to know more about me and my personal life? They might want to know more about you and not necessarily want to know about your professional history, because hopefully they've read your resume, and that may not have happened if you hear them go, so walk me through your resume. We hate that. So what other questions do we have? Let's see. Douglas says, I would never have guessed you feel stressed from presenting. It's only about 5 minutes right before I go live, and my heart rate also goes, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, we can't have that. So feel free to ask any questions you have. I'll go over a few more things before we wrap up, but I'm looking forward to seeing your comments and your questions. If you are watching the replay, please do say #replay and post your comments in the chat screen, because I will see them. I do get notified and I will answer them. So what other things have we talked about? Well, we talked about showing up, first of all, and how it's stressful to be online and why. because we're not getting the nonverbal cues we normally get in person. And that means we have to emote a lot more on camera than we would normally. We don't want to have Zoom zombie face, and we need to make sure we leverage our facial expressions and our vocal variety to get our point across and for people to understand where we're coming from an emotional and personal perspective. We want people to know, get an idea of who we are, right? So if we had this Zoom zombie face or a monotone tone of voice, they might get the wrong impression. Because here's the deal. In the absence of accurate data, people's brains leap to conclusions because we don't like not having the answers. Yep, that's right. So practice your setup before you go live. Be confident in your setup. Lower your cortisol level by deep breathing, mindfulness, meditation, take a walk. Definitely practice a power pose. It does work. Sounds corny. It works. Trust me. It does work. So let's see. Someone said, hi, you mentioned that you had some interview tips. Is it next week or have you had it posted? Well, these are your interview tips about how to interview virtually. Now, if you have interview preparation questions, I'm happy to answer those as well. And most importantly, what I would love for all of you watching to understand is I have a free 10-day career challenge that helps you prepare for interviews. So if you have interview preparation questions, you definitely want to be a part of this 10-day career challenge. It's absolutely free. It's online. And I share with you exactly how I prep all my clients to knock it out of the park when it comes to interviews. So you are not going to be at a loss for words at the interview, because most people, 98 plus people, have difficulty articulating their contributions, what their value is to employers. And the problem is, if we struggle with that and articulating our own value, then how are they to know what value we can bring? So I need to be able to do that clearly and succinctly. So that's what this 10-day career challenge is all about. You can find more information about that in the description of this live event. So hopefully you've enjoyed these tips and tricks to knock it out of the park when it comes to virtual interviews and elevating your influence, whether it be in interviews or online meetings. Let's see if we have any other questions. No, we don't. It's been a pleasure. And I'll look forward to talking with you next week. Now, on June 30th, we have a special guest joining us. His name is Larry Levine, and we'll be talking about how to increase your influence as a sales professional. And I'm super excited to have him join me on this live event. Hope you all have an excellent day.